Michael woke up every morning at 6:30, not because he wanted to, but because his alarm clock had been doing the same thing for almost 20 years. The sound was familiar, sharp, predictable, and every morning, when it rang, Michael felt the same thing: heavy, not pain, not sickness, just a strange, quiet heaviness in his body, the kind that makes you sit on the edge of the bed for a moment longer than you planned, the kind that makes you rub your eyes and wonder why you still feel tired, even after sleeping. But Michael was 50 years old, so he told himself something many people say: this is normal. Everyone feels tired at 50. At least that's what he believed. He had a stable job, a quiet house, two grown children who had already moved to other cities, and a life that looked perfectly ordinary. Every morning followed the same rhythm: wake up, walk slowly to the kitchen, pour coffee into the same blue mug he had used for years, stand by the window, drink, and stare at the quiet street outside. The world was always calm at that hour. Neighbors were still asleep. Cars were rare. The sky was usually pale gray, slowly turning into morning. Michael liked this moment, but he also noticed something, even after the coffee, even after washing his face, even after getting dressed. The tired feeling stayed with him. It stayed in his shoulders, in his eyes, in the way his body moved a little slower than before. At work, people noticed it sometimes. Long night? One coworker once asked. Michael smiled and shrugged. You know how it is. Getting older. Everyone laughed, because everyone seemed to believe the same thing. Getting older means being tired. Getting older means less energy. Getting older means slowing down. Michael repeated that idea so often that it became a quiet truth inside his mind. When he climbed the stairs at work and felt slightly out of breath, he told himself it was normal. When he felt sleepy in the middle of the afternoon meeting, he told himself it was normal. When he arrived home after work and sat on the couch without turning on the lights, he told himself it was normal. Sometimes he didn't even cook dinner. He would simply make a sandwich, eat slowly, and fall asleep in front of the television. Weekends were not very different. Saturday mornings used to be active. Years ago, he used to jog in the park. Sometimes he would ride a bicycle for an hour, but little by little, those habits disappeared. Not suddenly, just quietly. One weekend, he skipped the jog because he felt tired. The next weekend, he said he would rest just this once. And slowly, resting became the new routine. Michael did not feel sick. He did not feel pain. He simply felt less alive than before. But because nothing felt dramatic, he never thought deeply about it until one small moment changed everything. It happened during a routine health check, the kind people schedule once a year just to be responsible. Michael almost canceled the appointment. Work was busy, the weather was rainy, and he told himself he felt fine. But his daughter had insisted weeks earlier during a phone call. Dad, you always tell us to take care of our health, so you should do the same. So he kept the appointment. The clinic was quiet that morning. White walls, soft lights, the faint smell of disinfectant. Michael sat in the waiting room flipping through a magazine. But he wasn't really reading. He was thinking about work emails he needed to answer later. After a few minutes, a nurse called his name. The appointment felt routine: blood pressure, weight, simple questions. Everything looked normal, or at least normal enough. Finally, the doctor entered the room. He was calm, middle-aged, the kind of doctor who spoke slowly and listened carefully. They talked about basic things first: work, family, diet, sleep. Michael answered in short, simple sentences. Nothing unusual, everything ordinary. Then the doctor looked at the chart for a moment. He paused and asked a question that sounded very simple, but it made Michael stop thinking. The doctor said quietly, "Tell me something honestly. When was the last time you remember feeling truly energetic?" Michael opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out because suddenly he realized something strange. He could not remember. Not last month, not last year, maybe many years ago. The room became very quiet, and for the first time in a long time, Michael began to wonder if the tiredness he accepted as normal might actually be something else, something he had never really questioned. And that simple question was only the beginning. Michael stayed silent for several seconds. The doctor's question was simple, but it felt strangely difficult to answer. When was the last time you felt truly energetic? Michael tried to search his memory. Last week? No. Last month? He wasn't sure. Last year? Maybe. But even that answer did not feel honest. He finally smiled a little, slightly embarrassed. "I guess it's been a while." The doctor nodded slowly, not surprised, not judgmental, just thoughtful. "A lot of people say the same thing," he said. Michael leaned back slightly in the chair. He expected the doctor to explain that this was normal, that turning 50 simply meant feeling more tired. But the doctor asked another question instead. "How many hours do you usually sleep?" Michael shrugged. "6, maybe 6.5. Do you wake up during the night?" "Sometimes." "Do you feel rested when you wake up?" Michael laughed softly. "Not really, but I thought that was normal." The doctor wrote something on the chart. Then he looked back at Michael. "There are many things people think are normal," he said calmly, "but sometimes they are simply common, not healthy." Michael felt something shift in his thoughts. Common, but not healthy. That sentence stayed in his mind. The doctor continued asking questions, simple ones, but questions Michael had never really asked himself. "How much coffee do you drink each day?" "2 cups in the morning, sometimes 3. "Do you exercise?" Michael hesitated. "I used to run years ago." "How often now?" Michael smiled awkwardly. "Not really anymore." The doctor nodded again, still calm, still patient. "And stress?" Michael laughed quietly. "Well, I work in finance." That answer explained enough. They both understood. Deadlines, numbers, meetings, long hours sitting at a desk. Michael had lived this routine for decades. And slowly, without noticing, his habits had changed. Less movement, more coffee, more sitting, more late nights checking emails, more mental pressure. But because it happened gradually, he never saw it as a problem. The doctor leaned back slightly in his chair. "Let me tell you something," he said. "Feeling tired at 50 is very common." Michael nodded. Exactly what he believed. But the doctor continued. "However, it should not be constant." Michael raised his eyebrows slightly. The doctor explained calmly. "A healthy body can still have energy at 50, at 60, even at 70. Michael felt surprised hearing that. He had never really thought about it that way. Many of his friends complained about the same thing: tiredness, low energy, sleep problems. They joked about it often. "Welcome to getting old," they would say. But the doctor was not joking. He was serious. "Fatigue usually has a reason," the doctor continued. "Sometimes it's sleep. Sometimes stress. Sometimes diet. And sometimes, it's simply a lifestyle that slowly drains your energy. Michael looked down at his hands. For the first time, he began replaying his daily routine in his mind. Wake up tired, drink coffee, sit for hours, skip exercise, eat quickly, work late, sleep too little, repeat. It had become such a normal rhythm that he never questioned it. The doctor then asked another gentle question. What do your evenings look like? Michael thought about it. I usually get home around 6. Then, I sit on the couch, watch television, check my phone. And what time do you sleep? Usually after midnight? The doctor nodded slowly again. That might be part of the answer. Michael felt something strange, not fear, but curiosity. For the first time, someone was connecting the small pieces of his routine: sleep, movement, stress, food. The doctor explained further. Your body is like a system. When one part is slightly off, the whole system feels it. Michael listened carefully now, more carefully than he had expected, because suddenly he realized something. He had spent years accepting tiredness, but he had never investigated it. The doctor finally smiled gently. I'm not worried about anything serious, he said. But I think your body might be asking for small changes. Michael tilted his head. What kind of changes? The doctor closed the chart and answered calmly. Better sleep, less late-night screen time, more movement during the week, and possibly less caffeine. Michael laughed softly. That last one might be difficult. The doctor smiled. It usually is. The room felt lighter now, but Michael also felt thoughtful because something new had entered his mind. Maybe tiredness was not simply age. Maybe it was information, a signal, a message from his body that he had ignored for years. Before leaving the room, the doctor added one final sentence. You don't need to change everything at once. Just start noticing your habits. Sometimes awareness is the first step. Michael stood up slowly. He thanked the doctor. But as he walked out of the clinic and into the afternoon sunlight, he felt a quiet realization growing inside him. For years, he had said one sentence again and again. This is just what 50 feels like. But now he wasn't so sure anymore. Michael stepped out of the clinic and into the cool afternoon air. The sky above the parking lot was pale blue, with thin clouds moving slowly across it. Cars passed quietly on the road nearby. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and then fell silent again. Everything outside looked completely normal. But inside his mind, something had changed. He stood beside his car for a moment before unlocking the door. The doctor's question still echoed softly in his thoughts. When was the last time you felt truly energetic? He had tried to answer, but the truth was simple. He could not remember. That realization had surprised him more than anything else. Michael sat in the driver's seat and closed the door slowly. Usually, when he left appointments like this, he quickly returned to thinking about work, emails, deadlines, meetings. But today, his mind stayed quiet. Instead of thinking about work, he began thinking about himself, about his days, about the small habits that had slowly shaped his life. He started the car, but he didn't drive away immediately. Instead, he leaned back in the seat and stared through the windshield. For years, he had believed one simple idea. Feeling tired at 50 was normal. Everyone said it. Friends said it. Co-workers said it. Even advertisements seemed to say it. Energy drinks for people over 40. Vitamins promising to bring back your energy. Articles about fighting age-related fatigue. The message was always the same. Getting older means losing energy. Michael had accepted that idea without question, but now something inside him felt uncertain. What if the doctor was right? What if tiredness was not just about age? What if it was about the way he had been living? The thought was uncomfortable, but also interesting. He finally drove out of the parking lot and headed home. The afternoon traffic was light, and the familiar streets of his neighborhood passed slowly by the windows. He noticed something he had not paid attention to in years. A small park near the corner of Maple Street. Children were playing near the swings. A few people were jogging along the walking path. Michael slowed slightly as he passed. For a moment, he remembered something from many years ago. Saturday mornings, running shoes, cold air in his lungs, the steady rhythm of his feet hitting the pavement. He used to jog in that park, not every day, but often enough that it felt like part of his life. He could remember how his body felt after those runs. Tired, yes, but a good kind of tired. A tiredness that came with energy, with movement, with feeling alive. When had that stopped? Michael tried to remember. Maybe 10 years ago. Maybe longer. It had not been a dramatic decision. And there was no day when he said, "I will stop running." Instead, it happened slowly. One busy week, then another, a few rainy Saturdays, a few late nights at work, and little by little, the habit disappeared. He replaced it with something easier, sleeping in, watching television, drinking coffee. At the time, it seemed harmless, just a small change. But now he wondered how many other small changes had happened without him noticing. By the time Michael arrived home, and the sun was already lower in the sky, his house stood quietly at the end of the street, a simple two-story home he had lived in for nearly 25 years. He parked the car and walked slowly to the front door. Inside, the house felt calm and familiar. The living room looked exactly the way it had that morning. The couch, the lamp, the television remote resting on the table. Michael placed his keys down and walked to the kitchen. Without thinking, he opened the cabinet and reached for the coffee. But then he paused. The doctor's voice returned to his mind. Possibly less caffeine. Michael smiled slightly to himself. He closed the cabinet again. Instead, he filled a glass with water. The water was cool and refreshing as he drank it slowly. It was a small choice, but it felt intentional. He walked into the living room and sat on the couch. The television remote was right where he had left it earlier. Usually, he would turn the TV on immediately. Noise filled the house, news, sports, background conversations, but today he left the television off. The silence felt unusual at first. Michael leaned back and looked around the quiet room. For years, he had blamed his tiredness on getting older, but now he began noticing something else. His life had become very still. He sat most of the day at work. He sat most of the evening at home. Even his weekends were often spent sitting. No wonder his body felt slow. No wonder his energy felt low. A body that doesn't move slowly forgets how. Michael stood up and walked toward the hallway. At the end of the hall was a small storage room. He opened the door and turned on the light. Boxes, old tools, holiday decorations. And in the corner, a pair of running shoes. Michael stared at them for a moment. They were old now. Dust covered the sides. The laces were slightly yellow with age. But seeing them brought back a memory he had almost forgotten. The feeling of movement, of breathing deeply, of feeling strong in his own body. He picked up one shoe and turned it in his hands. For a moment, he laughed quietly. "I probably can't even run anymore," he said to himself. But the thought did not feel sad. It felt curious. Maybe he didn't need to run. Maybe he could simply walk. Later that evening, Michael did something he had not done in a long time. After dinner, instead of sitting on the couch, he stepped outside. The air was cool and fresh. Streetlights were beginning to glow softly along the road. Michael started walking slowly down the sidewalk. At first, his body felt stiff, his legs felt heavy. But after a few minutes, something changed. His breathing became deeper, his shoulders relaxed. The quiet rhythm of walking began to calm his thoughts. He walked only 15 minutes before turning back toward the house. But when he stepped inside again, he noticed something surprising. He did not feel more tired. He felt clearer. His mind felt lighter. His body felt warmer. That night, when Michael went to bed, he placed his phone on the nightstand and turned off the screen earlier than usual. The house was quiet, the room was dark, and as he lay there listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing, he thought about something the doctor had said. You don't need to change everything at once. Just start noticing your habits. Michael closed his eyes. For the first time in a long while, he felt something new growing quietly inside him. Not pressure, not guilt, just awareness. Maybe tiredness had never been the real problem. Maybe the real problem was that he had stopped listening to his body. And now, after one simple question, he was finally starting to hear it again. The next morning, Michael woke up before his alarm. In not much earlier, maybe 5 minutes, but it was enough to notice something different. Usually, when the alarm rang, his first feeling was resistance. His body would feel heavy, and he would lie in bed for a few extra minutes, trying to convince himself to start the day. But today was slightly different. His body still felt a little tired. That had not disappeared overnight, but there was also a quiet sense of curiosity. He remembered the walk from the night before. It had only been 15 minutes, nothing dramatic, but it had felt good, simple, calm. He sat on the edge of the bed and stretched his arms slowly. Outside the window, the early morning light was beginning to touch the rooftops across the street. For years, mornings had felt rushed. Alarm, coffee, emails, work. But today he moved a little slower, not because he was tired, but because he was paying attention. In the kitchen, he prepared his usual coffee, the same blue mug, the same quiet corner by the window. But this time, before taking the first sip, he paused. He looked at the mug for a moment. Then he poured himself a glass of water and drank it first. It felt refreshing, almost surprising. A small change, but it reminded him of something important. Habits are powerful. They shape our days without us noticing. And when habits change, even slightly, our days begin to change too. Michael left for work a little earlier than usual that morning. The air outside was cool and clear. As he walked from the parking lot to the office building, he noticed something he had not noticed in years: how quiet the early morning could be, the sound of birds, the faint hum of distant traffic, the feeling of the cool air filling his lungs. At work, the day started the same way it always did: meetings, emails, numbers on a screen. But something inside Michael had shifted. For the first time in a long while, he was observing his own habits. At around 10 in the morning, he automatically reached for his second cup of coffee. Then he stopped, not because coffee was bad, but because he wanted to notice the impulse. Was he actually tired, or was it simply routine? He sat back in his chair and waited for a moment. The tired feeling was still there, but he realized something interesting. It was not overwhelming. It was just familiar, like background noise he had stopped questioning. Instead of making another cup of coffee, he stood up and walked to the hallway. He walked slowly down the corridor and back. It took less than 2 minutes, but when he returned to his desk, his mind felt clearer. Not dramatically, just slightly. And that slight difference caught his attention. Later in the afternoon, during a long meeting, he noticed another habit. When the conversation became boring, his hand automatically reached for his phone. Emails, news, social media. Small distractions that filled the empty moments. But today he placed the phone back on the table. Instead, he leaned back in the chair and simply breathed slowly. In, out, in, out. It felt strange at first, but also calming. By the end of the workday, Michael noticed something else. His energy had not collapsed the way it usually did. Normally, by 5 o'clock, he felt completely drained, but today he felt steady, still a little tired, but not exhausted. That evening, when he arrived home, the house was quiet as usual. For a moment, the old habit returned. Sit on the couch, turn on the television, let the evening disappear. But instead, he did something different again. He changed his clothes and stepped outside. The sky was turning orange as the sun slowly dropped behind the houses. Michael began walking again, this time a little farther, not fast, not like exercise, just walking. As he moved down the street, something interesting happened in his mind. Memories began returning. Memories of when his body used to feel stronger, when movement was normal, when energy was natural. He realized that at some point, without noticing, he had stopped expecting his body to feel good. He had accepted tiredness as a permanent condition, like gray hair, like wrinkles. But maybe that belief had been too simple. Maybe his body had not been asking him to accept tiredness. Maybe it had been asking him to change something. Michael walked past the small park again. This time, he stopped at the entrance. The path curved gently around the grass and trees. A few people were walking dogs. A couple jogged slowly along the path. Michael stood there for a moment. Then he stepped inside. He walked the full loop around the park. The air smelled like grass and cool evening wind. His legs felt slightly sore near the end, but his mind felt clear. When he finally returned home, he noticed something he had not felt in a long time. A quiet sense of satisfaction, not because he had done something impressive, but because he had done something intentional. Later that night, as he prepared for bed, he looked at the clock. It was only 10:30. Usually he would still be watching television or scrolling through his phone. But tonight, his body felt ready for sleep. He turned off the lights and lay down. The room was dark and quiet. And before drifting to sleep, he thought again about the doctor's question. When was the last time you felt truly energetic? He still did not have the full answer, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was moving toward it. The changes in Michael's life did not happen all at once. There was no single morning when he suddenly woke up feeling 20 years younger. There was no dramatic moment when everything became easy. Instead, the changes were quiet, small, almost invisible at first, but they were real. During the first week after his doctor's appointment, Michael continued the same simple habit he had started. Walking, not running, not pushing his body too hard, just walking. Sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes 20, sometimes a little longer if the evening air felt pleasant. At first, his body resisted. His legs felt stiff. His breathing felt heavier than he remembered. And occasionally, the old voice inside his head returned. You're too tired today. You worked all day. You deserve to rest. For years, that voice had always won. But now Michael answered it differently. He told himself something simple. Just 10 minutes. If after 10 minutes he still felt too tired, he could go home. But something interesting happened almost every time. After 10 minutes, his body felt better. His breathing became smoother. His mind became quieter. So he kept walking. One evening became two. Two became five. And before he realized it, walking had quietly returned as part of his life. The other changes were just as small. He began going to bed earlier. At first, it felt strange to turn off the television so soon, but he replaced that time with something calmer, reading a few pages of a book, listening to soft music, sometimes simply sitting quietly with a cup of tea. Within a few days, he noticed something surprising. His sleep became deeper. Not perfect, but better. He woke up fewer times during the night, and when morning arrived, the alarm no longer felt like an enemy. Another habit slowly changed too. Coffee. For years, Michael had depended on it, cup after cup, hoping it would push away the tiredness. But now he began noticing something. When he slept better and moved more during the day, he needed less coffee. Not because he forced himself to stop, but because his body no longer asked for it as often. The biggest surprise came about 3 weeks later. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. Michael woke up naturally, no alarm. Sunlight was already shining softly through the curtains. He sat up slowly and stretched his arms. For a moment, he noticed something unusual. His body did not feel heavy. The familiar weight in his shoulders was gone. The fog behind his eyes was lighter. He stood up and walked to the kitchen. As he poured a glass of water, he suddenly realized something. He felt awake, not completely full of energy, but awake in a way he had not felt for years. The realization made him smile. It was a small moment, but a powerful one. Later that morning, he walked to the park again. The same path, the same trees, the same quiet rhythm of footsteps. But this time, something inside him felt different. He felt present, not rushing, not distracted, just moving. And as he walked beneath the trees, he remembered the doctor's question again. When was the last time you felt truly energetic? Michael still could not point to a single exact day in the past. But now he understood something important. Energy does not always return suddenly. Sometimes it grows slowly, like a plant, quietly, day by day, habit by habit. That afternoon, Michael called his daughter. They talked about work, about life, about ordinary things. At one point, she asked him a simple question. Dad, how was your doctor's appointment? Michael laughed softly. It was interesting. Interesting how? He thought for a moment before answering. The doctor didn't really give me medicine. So what did he do? Michael smiled. He asked me one question. What question? Michael looked out the window at the afternoon light. Then he said calmly, he asked when I last felt truly energetic. His daughter was quiet for a moment. And what did you say? Michael smiled again. At the time, I didn't have an answer. But now, Michael thought about his morning walk, about the sunlight, about the quiet energy he had felt in his body, and he replied, now I think I'm getting closer to the answer. The truth was simple. For years, Michael had accepted tiredness without questioning it. He'd believed it was simply part of aging. But sometimes, what we call normal is just something we have stopped paying attention to. Our bodies are always communicating with us, through energy, through sleep, through stress, through the quiet signals we often ignore. And sometimes, all it takes is one simple question to make us listen again. If you are listening to this story and you often feel tired, maybe you have told yourself the same thing Michael once believed. That's just what getting older feels like. But sometimes, the real question is not about age. Sometimes the real question is this: what habits might be quietly shaping the way your body feels every day? Small changes may not transform your life overnight, but over time, they can change more than you expect. If this slow story helped you relax, reflect, or practice your English listening, consider subscribing to the channel. Here we share calm life stories designed to help you learn English naturally, while also exploring meaningful moments from everyday life. And thank you for listening. And perhaps tonight, you might ask yourself the same question Michael heard in that quiet doctor's office. When was the last time you truly felt energetic?